So over the past 3 years, I've been on an immense healing journey to heal and unprogram my sexual trauma. My intention with this video is to share my experience of healing in 3 different areas, including physical and psychological, mental, emotional, as well as spiritual and energetic. There's a way to uncage yourself from the experiences and reprogram your mindset and feelings around the trauma and around the situation. And that is when they say alchemizing. That is how you alchemize the situation into personal power. Hi, I'm Natalie, and this is Paisley, and this is Be a Free Spirit. I am a certified transpersonal coach, and I focus on guiding those who are starting or going through their ascension. So in this video, I'm going to be going over my sexual trauma experience, as well as how I've healed through that experience. As I mentioned in the intro, I've healed more than one way. I've healed physically and psychologically, as well as emotionally, mentally, and spiritually from an energetic level. And I really wanted to share my experience so far. I'm still on this healing journey, but I've really made a lot of progress where I've unprogrammed most of the mindsets and programming and trauma and everything that just came from multiple situations, but mainly the sexual trauma. I can now talk about it with no trauma response. I feel completely calm and disattached from the experience, but yet aware of what had happened. I definitely want to give a trigger warning. This video does talk about instances of sexual assault, rape, and sexual manipulation. So if you're not at a point in your journey where it's comfortable hearing those things, it's completely understandable. Just take care of what you need for you. So let's jump straight into the video, and I'm going to share a little bit about my background, how I grew up, and a little bit of what I was taught about sex. So I actually grew up Mormon, or LDS, and I think most people are familiar with the term, and if you're not, it's a very intense religion that is Christian-based, but there's a lot of rules and a lot of regulations and a lot of separation as well. So for me, just sharing a couple of aspects of that is the church was almost taboo when it came to sex. You know, like masturbation was really seen as something that is gross and dirty, and sex before marriage, and sex in general was just never really talked about. Women weren't taught about our own sexual needs or desires or our own bodies in general. It was always kind of just from the idea of your body creates a baby and that's it. So that definitely, I feel like, played a part in the relationship that I had with my own sexuality as well as my own body. I didn't realize until I was in therapy what my sexual preference was. I always assumed, because of the way that I grew up with my religion, that my preference for wanting to wait until I loved someone came from the programming of the religion. But in truth, that is just my sexual preference. I identify as demisexual, which means that I don't really feel sexual desire unless I have an emotional or intellectual connection with the person. And I was never really taught about consensual sex or even exploring my own body. So I was very, very naive when it came to sex and understanding that whole dynamic. So that's a little bit of background. Now moving into my sexual trauma experiences. So when I was 16, I met my high school boyfriend, who was very much obsessed and let me know from the start with taking my virginity. You know, it was very clear, but not firm, because I didn't understand how to respect my own boundaries or how to even identify my own boundaries. But I had told him I wanted to wait until I was in love. And, you know, he would always just say a lot of really demeaning things about me being a virgin and what he wanted to do with the situation, basically. So there were many times where I didn't want to have sex, but I had no idea how to say no. I had no idea how to respect what I was feeling. I just kind of went along with it. So I went through a lot of sexual manipulation in that relationship. He would always tell me how much he loved me and we're going to college, and it made me feel like I was important. But his actions really proved otherwise. Even during sex as well as outside of sex, he just treated me like I didn't matter, but yet the words felt different. And that was hard for me because I didn't understand what I was actually facing was sexual assault, was rape. Even though I felt like it was consensual at the time, I didn't understand that that's what I was experiencing. We ended up breaking up, and who knows over what at this point. A common response for people who suffer sexual trauma is hypersexual activity. And for me, that is something that I felt after we broke up. I just kind of went on a little bit of a self kind of sabotaging spiral, and I would hook up with a bunch of guys but not actually have physical intercourse because my heart kind of like wouldn't let me move forward, but yet I was trying to kind of engage in activity any way that I could to kind of feel that security, to feel that safety that I had found familiar at this point. My friend had dragged me to a party the night before prom, and I had never had alcohol at this point, or smoked or anything like that. Again, very naive. I had not understood that this is really out in the world. And one of these guys handed me a drink, and I was like, okay, yeah, why not? You know, my friend was kind of encouraging me, like, yeah, go for it, taking shots, not understanding party and drink safety as well. I had never been talked to about how to be safe at parties. So, you know, I really don't remember a lot. I had blacked out at some point, and the last thing I remember is waking up in a closet with two guys that I had no idea who they were. So it was obvious that I had been roofied, drug raped, and I don't remember a lot of it. And even going through processing, I haven't been able to reclaim those memories in any way. So I really was probably unconscious for most of it. For both of these instances, the theme really was that I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell anyone that was happening with my boyfriend because I thought people would say, well, you're not saying no, just say no. And I thought people would say, well, he's your boyfriend. What do you mean? Rape doesn't happen with your boyfriend. And then with this drinking situation and this drug rape, I thought people would say, well, why did you drink? It's your fault. You were drunk. All these type of things that go through our heads. I was just so worried about people perceiving me as not telling the truth, which unfortunately so many sexual assault victims have to face. So I actually went years without processing, without dealing with it, just kind of letting it flow to the back of my head, just kind of assuming it would just go away. So it actually wasn't until 7 years later when I was in therapy for getting out of a 7-year relationship, and lo and behold, learning that some of the trauma that I had been through in that relationship has connected to other pieces throughout the sexual trauma that I've experienced. My therapist was experienced in using the EMDR method, which is an amazing method that therapists use to help you reprogram your relationship, the way that you see it, how you experience the trauma, and completely change your neural pathways with the experience. That's really what I want to get into now, is talk about the 3 healing areas that I really focused on and why I think it's important to have every aspect, because it's a holistic picture of taking care of truly the mind, reprogramming how the trauma affects the mind, and reprogramming how the body handles the experience. And then from an energetic level, helping disconnect that so that the soul can step forward without those boundaries. So let's talk about physical and nervous system healing. So as I've already kind of mentioned, I saw a therapist for probably about 1.5 years. And EMDR was a fast-paced process because you are processing the experience directly again. And this is where, it can be really painful, and it's not for everyone. Because you are reprocessing the experience, you almost relive it if you can access those memories, but your body will remember it. You'll probably feel some of those emotions that you felt. It can be really heavy. But once you kind of bring that back to the surface, then EMDR helps reprogram the feelings towards it, the reactions towards it, all of it. And that's what it did for me. Is again, like, I could barely talk about that experience without bursting into tears and my body having like a trauma response. Now I can talk about it and I feel, again, disattached from it, but in an aware way, because it really gets to the root of what has occurred in the human psyche, and then kind of ties it to the body as well, so that whole part can be reprogrammed. And it's just truly amazing what we can accomplish that way. The next thing that I did to help reprogram my body's response was reading the Body Keeps score. And I definitely recommend reading it with a therapist because it is very heavy and it can feel really hard when you're dealing with that. The sexual trauma really affected even like kind of the way that I would self-soothe. I had an eating disorder. I used to binge eat, and I've always struggled with maintaining that connection to my body. I was always so disassociated from my body that I could never really feel if I was full, or it was just a way to really numb myself. So that's really how it manifested for me. So once I really read the Body Keeps score and I started to understand more about connecting back into my body, I was able to heal my eating disorder and in general just create a more balanced approach. The third thing I did to work on kind of reprogramming my body's response is self-exploration when it comes to what I like, what I'm interested in, what works for me, what doesn't, because that helped me learn what my boundaries are and how I can provide pleasure and things for myself. I had never explored that before. And that was a huge empowering experience for my body also to reprocess what sexual pleasure feels like. That it's not taboo or it's not a trauma response. It's not, putting my life in danger. So those 3 things really helped me heal and reprogram my body and my mind's response to the trauma. The next one I want to talk about is emotional. And obviously this ties into kind of all of those, but I wanted to point this out specifically because there were a lot of mindsets that I had when it came to, and belief systems that I had when it came to sexual trauma and what I had been through in general. You've probably already heard me say it a few times throughout this video that I clearly believed that it was my fault that I had experienced the trauma that I had been through. I thought because I didn't say no, because I drank, because I did this, it was my fault that I was sexually assaulted. Took me a long time to also forgive Natalie, that part of me who was just naive and only had the best of what she had at the time. But it took me a long time to unprogram those mindsets. And how I did that is my therapist had me write like a lot of letters to my child self as well as this wounded part of myself, almost forgiving that part of me, saying, I forgive you, because I needed that. I needed to just kind of connect those dots and be able to just have compassion for those pieces of me. And for me also, this is a very personal decision, and I don't think there's a right way that we should do this. But for me, I did personally decide to forgive my attackers. Now, I didn't forgive them like in person or to their faces or talking to them or anything like that. But for me personally, I wanted to take away the power that I felt like they had over me. I wanted to just say, you're like kind of out of my experience now. I control this narrative. And to me, that was important. And I really do feel like that set me free in a way. Now I understand not everybody wants to forgive their attacker, and it's just a very personal decision. So whatever feels right to you, that's going to be completely your decision. But for me, it was helpful to give forgiveness to heal and to move forward emotionally. So that really helped me. And again, it was writing letters. I just wrote a letter to them kind of saying like, you made me angry, you took advantage of me, blah, 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 like getting all of those feelings out. But then also saying like, I forgive you, like this is my past. So emotionally, that's still kind of the continuation that I feel like I'm always kind of still healing, is just remembering my own worth, respecting my own boundaries, understanding what my boundaries are, getting clear on what's important to me, what's not, getting educated about my body, right? I'm taking my own practical steps towards kind of rebuilding my kind of self-worth in that area. So it's still an ongoing process, but it's important to heal it emotionally. So for me, energetically, like cutting an energetic cord is why forgiveness was also important to me. At the time, I wasn't spiritual. I hadn't unlocked that part of myself yet. So I didn't understand that concept. But to this day, I'm glad I chose forgiveness, because I know that I cut an energetic cord with my connection to that situation. So energetically, that can be important, but again, it's a personal choice and everyone has their own ascension. I do a lot of Epsom salt baths when I can, or smudge my energy field, especially when I was really focusing on getting more into my body. I spent a lot of time like smudging and getting my energy clear from dead energy of what I was healing and working through. So it's really just going to depend what your soul needs at that time, and where you're at on your journey. Because when I first started this healing path, I wasn't into spirituality. So I was mainly just focusing on like the psyche by going to a therapist. Those healing areas have been very impactful for me. And I definitely recommend looking into EMDR if maybe you're not aware of your trauma all the way, like where it roots from, or if you have never really dug into the trauma. Doing it with a therapist and through EMDR can be transformative. So I really do recommend it. But I understand that everyone just has their own ascension. This is all going to be a personal journey. And the best thing you can do is be compassionate and kind to yourself. Okay. I really hope this brought you guys some peace and clarity, and maybe some hope if you're on a healing journey with trauma or in general. It's still a process. So let me know what you got out of this video, but I am sending you guys so much love and light for those of you who are on a healing journey. You're gonna make it through. I'm proof that you make it through and feel incredible and feel empowered every single day. It's completely possible. I will see you guys in the next video.